MountVernon19201818, vacating and selling the north-south 16-foot alley right-of-way adjacent to 906 and 824 Summit Avenue Southwest, Mount Vernon, Iowa. Chris?
This is the first reading, not the second reading. I apologize for the little verbiage underneath on the agenda. But this is an alley that really has no city use whatsoever. Cornell has been contacted. They own the center of what would be this U-shaped. So Cornell owns this ground here. The alley sits right here. There's actually two other locations to enter this facility or enter their facility on. So we contacted Alliant Energy. There's no utilities there. We really have no purpose for it. It's overgrown and not accessible as it is today. So.
Did one of the residents contact us, or what prompted?
Yeah. So my apologies. The residents would actually be to the west. Had plans to build a garage. Had originally talked about doing it on the west side of their property. We talked about this alley, just brought up the discussion. They decided to build a garage still on the west side of their property, but then conversed about the alley. We have reached out to the property owner to the east, and it's in a trust. So it's been extremely difficult to get an answer one way or the other, or even find out who's the executor. Heather has tried multiple occasions to see if they want half of that 16-foot alley, but seeing as though they haven't communicated with us, it's just we would vacate and sell to the property owners to the west.
Have they've expressed interest in?
Yeah, they're actually in the audience today.
Oh, okay. So we're just going to continue to talk about it, so don't worry about it. All right, excellent.
So yeah, and my understanding, you guys have maintained it.
Yes, we have, for 32 years.
Well, thank you for sharing.
Just makes it a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay.
How long is it? It's 16 wide, and how long?
So it's an odd, so their lot actually faces to the west. I mean, and you have half of another lot to the south of you.
Not quite half, no.
It's about 115 feet.
Yes, that's correct.
You get about 1,800 square feet or so.
Give or take, yeah.
And we've got a oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
So yeah.
One at a time.
I'm just going to shut up.
Yeah, if you read the legal description and follow along on the Linn County GIS, it's one of those where I had to kind of finagle a little bit. It's a quick claim deed, so it's nothing too spectacular.
So with the difficulty contacting the other half, we've got a process, right? I mean, I feel like we've done this before. We send a letter, or we do something.
We send a letter. If they reach out to us and then verbally tell us that they don't want it, we have them sign a kind of an affidavit stating that they didn't want their half. If they don't answer us, we just go ahead and include in the file all of the communication attempts that we've tried.
Yep.
There is no legal responsibility for the city to split it in half. It's just general practice to split it in half should both sides want it.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that if the other side wanted it, they would make more of an effort to let us know they would. So.
We tried to, and we failed. We've tried every three different ways to do this, and we could not get a response. So.
So the address is in the verbiage of the ordinance, correct? 824 and 906?
Our address is 906. The neighbor who won't respond is 824.
So even though it sounds like it's a different block.
Right,
it's
exactly.
a lot of the right
Yeah.
number. Okay, that's
Just
fine.
in
Yeah.
between.
Somebody else?
So all the fees and everything can be paid by the purchaser, is that
Correct.
Seeing no issues, I move to approve ordinance number 11-15-2018A, vacating sell the north-south 16-foot alley right of way adjacent to 906 and 824 Summit Avenue Southwest.
I'll second that.
Any comments? No comments? Roll call, please, Sue.
Weisler,
Yes.
Rodebush,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Next item, resolution 11/5/2018B, making the award of the construction bid for the building improvements for the Lester Burris Families Community Wellness Center project. Chris?
You need a motion to remove this from the table.
So moved.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, motion carries. Chris?
As I explained at the last meeting, we had great bids. We had 4 bids that actually came in under the $7 million mark for their base package, and then every one of them just crept over the $7 million mark with the 4 alternatives. But overall, it was a construction estimate of $7.8 million. The bids came in at $7,059,000. You've already approved $75,000 for Braun Intertech at the last meeting to do additional testing and inspections. So, as I said at the last meeting, there's a couple $100,000 worth of additional items that we know about right now: security equipment, buying some of the equipment as opposed to leasing it. We still have $385,000 contingency on top of that, so we're working with the architects right now on the efficiencies. So if there's other building efficiencies that we want to come back in front of the council with, or staffing efficiencies, those would be priority number 1. And then priority number 2 would be going back to the equipment, making sure that whatever programs Matt wants to bring to this facility, that you would have the equipment and all the items needed to do that.
Also, I'd like to state this, because from here on, I will not be a yes for any of this until this council passes a resolution stating that no funds will be taken from anywhere but the designated areas of the lost, membership, rental, and donations. I mean, we set a precedence. I thought that was what we were doing when we did the K-9. All new projects or programs or whatever should have its own funds. And I thought that's what we were starting there. But obviously, the council doesn't think that, $125,000 is being set aside every year, which only $25,000 is going to the payment of the facility. So that's $100,000 a year. And if anybody in this council thinks that that facility is going to lose $100,000 a year, they should have never brought it up to get this far. That's to not pass this resolution. And I understand that Chris brought up that the next councils aren't held to this, but that's the next council. This is this council. We need to think about what we do for the city, not what the next council does. Who cares what the next council does? It's us now. And financially, fiscally, responsibility is to say that this will not take funds from anywhere else. So, like I said, I've been on board with this, getting it going, and I liked it when we got all the donations. That's why I'm on board with this. But now we need to be responsible and say, hey, we got the funding in these areas, and if it can't support that, then there's no reason we should ever put this up. So I really think we should put a resolution up, and the next council can vote it down, and then they can go to the constituents and say, hey, that's why we did it. But right now, we should say these sources are only the ones we're going to sap off of, other than that. So, not that it matters, I'm one vote, and there's 4 here, but I would be a no, unless we get a resolution.
So in terms of process, Chris, what?
So you can hold a vote, obviously, tonight on this. I kind of want to clarify what I said before. The issue with the resolution that I have is you've already borrowed funds that are general obligation debt. So to go back and say that even though we don't plan on using the debt service levy, you backed those bonds with the debt service levy. So passing a resolution of any sort legally wouldn't be binding at all, because you've already backed those bonds with general obligation debt. So if you can make no other payment arrangements, you will have to tax for those payments. They're being repaid with TIF. And you still have the ability, as I stated before, the goal of staff was to make sure that we had a safety net. I'm not advocating that we bank $100,000 in lost proceeds every year with this facility. If obviously we get to a point where this facility is actually operating in the black, which is, a hope of mine, then those sales tax funds can be used at the council's discretion and pay off bonds if they would like. It's just trying to do our most due diligence here. But that's my only comment about the resolution. And I stated this at the last meeting. I didn't think the one that was passed previously held any water either.
Well, still, it's there to at least give somebody the knowledge that, hey, you better do your job. You need to work hard to get the facility to where it needs to be financially stable. And as far as you saying these funds have to be committed to that, you're saying the $125,000 has to be used for the payment, possibility of using the payment, even though we're TIFing?
No. The $125,000,
That's not
the
committed.
rules that it has is it has to be used for that facility.
Right.
My point is we brought to you a repayment schedule utilizing TIF so that
Right.
should, and it was a concern of the council, should this not be operating in the black, that you would have lost funds to maybe cover those deficits. If it operates in the black and we don't have any deficits, you can take that $100,000 and make a partial bond payment with it. You can put it or set it aside in depreciation accounts. There's a number of things that you can do as long as it's directed towards that facility.
Well, I guess I'm losing something here because right now the facility, I'm not talking maintenance and operation, I'm talking the facility is being paid for by TIF.
Correct.
So what does that have to do with, I'm just stating that operation and maintenance, that's what I want. I want to make sure that operation and maintenance is not sucking money out of any other source. I mean, if TIF's paying for the facility, then we're good. I just don't want it running into the red that it gets so bad that, well, we're going to have to take some from the general fund. That's, in the 125,000 should be more.
Eric, and nobody wants it to run in the red.
Nobody does, I understand it,
But I think it was, hold on, I think it was made clear to us that when we bonded for the $5 million, just 2 months ago, that if there was no other option, we would have to find some other funding source for that. And so now, I understand what you're trying to accomplish, but I think what Eric is saying, what I recall very vividly, was it was made clear to us that if we bond for this amount and we run into financial troubles on that, for other reasons in the city that have nothing to do with the community center, that we may end up needing to levy some sort of tax to pay back that bond. So to now come back and say, I don't care what happens, if we run into the red, we're not going to use any other funding source, belies a vote that we took several months ago. So I get what you're saying, but we're too far down the road to put something like that in place.
I understand what you're saying now. If you were to pass a resolution that talked about just the maintenance and operation of the facility, again, I'll make the same comment that I made on the previous one. I don't think it holds water. If you want to do that, that's fine. You can't pass a resolution that says, there's no other funding mechanism, you know.
No, to pay the payment, I understand, it's, if I bought a Cadillac and I couldn't make the, all I could do is make the payments on the Cadillac and not drive it, and I stuffed it in my drive, I have to make the payments on the Cadillac, but I can't drive it and change the oil anymore because I don't have enough money to do that. But I will make the payments on the Cadillac to keep the Cadillac, I understand that. If there's a problem with paying for the facility itself, the building, yes, I can understand this, we can tap other sources. What I don't want is the operation and maintenance to cause problems with the city. That's what I want. And if it gets to a point, then you ask for more donations or whatever the case gets. But that's what I would never let the facility, we build a $7 million facility and say, oh geez, we'll stop making payments on it. And no, we can't do that. I understand it, but what we did with the K-9 unit is what we should do with this. It should have, well, and this has, like I said, it has more than enough sources for money. So, and they got theirs from donations, so.
To touch on what you said though about donations, there's nothing that does prevent us from asking more donations
That's
in the
correct.
future. But I can tell you one thing, that having a tangible facility up at this point in time is going to make that more viable, because people haven't seen it yet. And we've been talking about it for how many years?
30.
And we need to give it the opportunity. We need to give the community the opportunity. And I agree with you, if we need to, that is an option.
Well, the option is now, like I said. We could pass a resolution, whether it holds water or not. I'll feel better that it's at least in a resolution and people can at least say, hey, why did you pass this? And you need to do your due diligence to make sure the facility is getting in the black or is covered by the loss funds. That's all I'm saying.
Tom, go ahead.
I realize the importance of our fiduciary role here as a responsibility of a council member. And I also want to be extremely fiscally responsible, and I think we have, and I think the city has, and the committee has been fiscally responsible to get us to this point. We haven't rushed anything, we've done a lot of fundraising to get us to this point. And I too want it to be operationally be a break even, and with as much data as we have, I mean, it's not built, so we don't have real data, but with as much budgeting data as we have, with that $275,000 to $300,000 figure for operational expenses over the course of the year, between membership fees and rentals and so on, I don't think that's too high of a hurdle to hit. But I think that'll do that. I've got a lot of faith in Matt Siders here, but I think once that gets built, that'll be able to hit that number.
So
That's why
like I said, there shouldn't be any reason why not to pass it then, like I said. If it's all in place, and we're very confident of that. And I'm confident in Matt too, so, but I just like to see it out there.
Christina, I'm happy with the conservative approach that we've taken in terms of the numbers, and where the bid came in, and also the fact that Darling has also won the bid on the school, where there's some capacity for efficiencies there. I'm going to move that we approve Resolution 11-5-2018D.
I will second.
Any comments? No comments, roll call please, Sue.
Raudebush,
No.
Herman,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Weisler,
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
Okay, next item, Resolution 11-19-2018A, approving contract and bond for mobilization and construction of the Lester Burrish Family Community Wellness Center improvements for Garland Construction. Chris?
Bonds from United Fire and Casualty have been submitted to the city. The contract is a standard AIA contract. It's been through our legal counsel, and the insurance, the city has builder's risk insurance in place as well through ICAP. So again, going back, taking the conservative approach, making sure that we have all our bases covered, we're recommending moving forward with the contract with Garling.
Anybody have any questions for Chris?
comment that I'm amazed with the substantial completion date, September 15th next year, but that's what's in there, and that's what they think they can do, and we'll do, so.
Our site is easy compared to the schools.
I know, they're throwing, yeah.
Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion for this resolution.
I move approval of resolution 2018A.
I second.
Any comments? Roll call, please, Sue.
Rautenbush.
No.
West.
Yes.
Weisler.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
Next item, resolution 2018B, accepting work for the project known as the First Street West Culvert Replacement Project with Avery Construction. Chris?
As you know, this project is complete. Total project cost was $48,508.90. There's a retainage of $2,425.45 that needs to be paid yet, but all in all, happy with the work that was completed, the expediency that it was completed, and we had just a handful of complaints about signage, but all in all, it's a good project for us.
I'd move approval of resolution 2018B, accepting work for the First Street West Culvert Replacement Project.
I'll second that, is 1119?
Yeah.
So that 19.
I did.
Yeah, okay.
And I read that right off of the resolution paperwork. So at the top of the one, I think in the agenda it's correct, but in
Yeah.
the resolution, it's the 15.
And I think there's a new one.
Is there an, okay, all right. So amend that to 15.
19.
Good God. 11/19/2018B.
Top of the second.
Thank you.
Any comments? Roll call, please.
Weisler.
Yes.
Rose.
Yes.
Rautenbush.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Herman.
Yes.
All right, resolution 2018C, dedicating and establishing a 25-foot sanitary sewer easement on parcel A, point of plat, 1743, city of Mount Vernon, Iowa. Chris?
This is discussed a while back by staff. So originally, the developer had submitted a plan that would ask the city to sell this park space. And then, we decided not to do that, obviously, and he changed his plat. And that being said, though, the best way to connect the two parcels is through a sewer easement through the park. So we've situated the easement on a ridgeline, and down below, or what would be to the west of this sewer easement, will actually be where we'll likely have to do our own detention. It's right before the green space and the waterway. We've left all of the flat area where this park is going to be, where we plan on doing things. We don't have any building plans per se that would be impacted by this 25-foot easement, so staff is recommending that we go ahead and grant that so that we maintain the sewer utilities between the two phases.
Are they installing the sewer, or would we?
Correct, yes. We're just granting an easement. Again, it's the coming off that cul-de-sac, and then there's kind of a 90-degree street on the north of the park that it hoped would be all one, but
Right.
the park is going to be in between.
Yeah.
What's the depth of this sewer?
I'd have to look at the plans,
Like 4 or 5.
at least.
We won't be able to plant.
We'll be able to.
Within certain distances.
It's our easement, so technically we can.
What if anything ever happened?
Yeah, I mean, we're creating our own work at that
Right.
point, so. But I believe playground, parking spaces for this park.
Yeah, walking trail, future restroom, and basketball court.
So for the restroom, this actually benefits us.
that.
Hire it into it. Okay. Any other questions for Chris? Entertain a motion?
approval of resolution 1119-2018C, dedicating and establishing 25-foot sanitary sewer easement through the borough.
I'll second that.
Comments? Any roll call?
West,
Yes.
Herman,
Yes.
Rosebush,
Yes.
Rose,
Yes.
Weezer.
Yes.
All right, next item, motions for approval, consideration of claims list. Should have the most recent in front of us. Entertain a motion. You ready?
I'll make a motion to approve the most recent claims list as presented.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion and consideration of pay application number 2, First Street West culvert replacement. Chris?
As pointed out in the resolution approving the improvements, there is a retainage of $2,425.45 that will go to Avery. There's a 31-day waiting period from your approval, so we'll actually cut the check bullet and then mail it after the 31 days.
So just out of curiosity, what's the idea behind the retainage?
To make sure that there are no mechanics liens or any other liens that have been placed if they have subcontractors,
Okay.
to make sure that everything comes back clear before we release that money.
So if those things were in place, we wouldn't.
There's a process. Legally, we can't just hold it. We would have to go ahead and indicate through our attorney that we intended to keep those retained funds because of whatever was
What
taken
else
out
is
there.
going on? Okay. So I guess all of this by way of saying, by approving this 31 days in advance, do
You're
we
only
screw
approving the
anything else
payment
up?
until it comes back clear. If it does not
Okay.
come back clear, then we will come back in front of you and tell you that we're going a different direction.
Okay. So essentially, this is if nothing else happens, which 99% of the time it doesn't.
The
Then we-
unfortunate part for us, just because you meet every 2 weeks,
Right.
is trying to do this in such a manner that
Yeah.
it falls within that 31-day period.
Okay. I just wanted to. I had about 85% of that figured out in my head. I just wanted to make
Yeah,
sure that I
and
understood.
that's the reason that we hold the check, just to make sure, and then we'll get another notification from B&K that the 31-day period is gone past and that nothing has been filed.
Gotcha. Okay. Cool.
Bill, Larry, you gonna make a motion?
Sure. I'd make a motion to approve the final pay application for the retainage and payment to Avery Construction for the $2,425.45 following the 31-day waiting period.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, discussion consideration of septic construction, 119 Ink Road.
This is a farmhouse north of town that's been on a septic for quite some time, but they had an inspection after they sold it, and the old septic did not pass, so they need to put a new septic in. There is no way that I would ever recommend us trying to put sewer up there to feed this house for the very few places that we would get. So this is one of those situations where we would recommend that they allow to be able to put a new septic back in there. They do have their approval from the Lynn County Public Health Department, so everything is in order. It's passed all its tests, so.
I'll make a motion to approve the septic system at the new residence of 119 Link Road.
Sorry.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, discussion and consideration of granting change order approval to the mayor, Lester Burrish Family Community Wellness Center project.
So this is something that has historically happened in Mount Vernon, and it's also something that I've done on larger projects before. So we are going to have change orders with this project. Some of those change orders might be $1,000 to $2,000. They would actually be in my approval realm of the $3,000 limit, but some of them are slightly time sensitive, or can be time sensitive. I put $10,000 in there because I think that's a kind of the cap at where they should have to come back to council and make a much better discussion. But I guess what we are asking, or what staff is asking, is for us to let a change order go through the submittal process. It goes through the design engineers, the architects, city staff, Ron Intertech, and then to the mayor. So it's gone through at least 4 layers before it gets to the mayor for approval. By granting this authority, then obviously they don't have to wait 2 weeks every time we want to do a series of change orders, especially right now with weather being what it is. Not having city staff approve it though and going directly to the mayor, I mean, we would include all of the council in correspondence so you knew what the change order was for. But there are going to be probably a series of these smaller change orders under this that would be cumbersome if we had to try and keep bringing them back to the council.
Plus they could end up costing more if we have to delay 2 weeks or longer.
And it would be specific to this project.
Correct.
I definitely would like to be in the communique on that though. I've got 40 years of commercial and residential experience that I'd like to know about some of them.
And I have, and if there are individual change orders that you have questioned and would, a response by this council saying that we would prefer to have this at a council meeting, I have no objection for it. But for those that seemingly have zero objection from this council, it would be just easier and to keep the schedule moving forward if we had the mayor have that ability.
And I assume if we did that, at each council meeting, we get a schedule.
You get an update, yeah.
Of any that
Correct.
And these would be change orders issued by us, or or the contractor could come to us and say, we found something that
Change orders initiated by the contractor, vetted through the design engineers, the architects, Ron Intertech, who we've hired as kind of a third-party inspector, staff, and then back.
So only through the contractor. What about
If we decide to change, you're going to be on the front end of that because we haven't approved those expenditures, if that makes sense. So we've already approved to spend, up to $8.6 million on this facility. If, for instance, I'll use solar. So if solar comes back and it's an additional expense of $200,000, you haven't given staff permission to do that. So that would come back before panels would be ordered and anything would be directed.
Most of those would be over 10,000 like that
Correct.
anyway.
Yes.
But even in the case of less than 10,000, if it's initiated by the
Nothing, as I put in this last statement, you're not granting the mayor approval to change the scope of the project. This is basically for change order clarifications, and those change orders, as you know, something wasn't caught in the plan, or we dug a hole and found soils that they didn't like, and things of that nature. So.
Well, maybe people will ever talk about change orders before we've started the project. I think, I personally have faith in OPM on 2 counts. First of all, the fact that they put together specs and so on that had an interest from 9 different contractors that got involved with it. So that was an indication that they were tight specs, number 1. And number 2, just because as a buyer and owner from them previously, their change orders on the current high school was a little under 1.5%, and then the owner, the school district, added another 1.5%. So historically, this architect firm has been good for us, and I think it shows with the contractors and what their past history has been. So that's why I pay for this project, that we won't have to have a lot of situations where we get over that.
Yeah, well, and Makoko, when they added that the big facility, the gym at Makoko High School, if you guys have been to that?
Yeah.
Well, I was the project manager on that, and halfway through the project, we had 82 change orders already.
It'll happen.
So it can happen quite a bit.
I can't replace
It was
the internet
Apex, I
house
think.
without finding something I wasn't expecting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
$8 million
we expect
project.
change
It's gonna
orders,
be
and we
cheap.
asked, we
Yeah.
actually
That's why
asked
I'm
the
doing
questions
it.
of the architecture.
Mark it ahead, but-
Yeah, I think it's good.
Well, with that, I would move approval of the change order request procedure changes as presented in the memo.
I would second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next item, reports. Mount Vernon Police Report. Chief, anything you want to highlight to the council from your report?
Nothing to add.
Anybody have any questions for Chief?
Thanks for the canine report.
It was a busy month for him, so
Yeah.
he's good.
It's good to see that.
See, we didn't get 2 months in a row with how to roundabout.
Asking too much.
Someday.
That's asking too much. Anything, all right, we'll move on to Public Works Report. Mr. Gibson, anything for the council?
Nothing to add.
Anybody have anything for Nick on his report?
With the, and this is kind of a general, with the snow, I know leave pickup is scheduled for this next week, right? Like this is the last
They'll
one?
continue through this week.
Okay.
He was in today and he's actually planning on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or might even be going on Thanksgiving as well, but we'll evaluate at the end of those 4 days. Most of the individuals that have these out, I've had them out, so when he gets back through this 4 days, hopefully he should have hit everybody at that point.
I hope so.
Yeah,
It's a mess.
all the snow's melted by then.
Mhm.
Yeah. All right, next, Mount Vernon Park and Rec report. Matthew, anything you'd like to highlight for the council?
Sorry, what?
We would be shocked if you did not.
Exactly. I do want to reiterate that next Thursday, not this Thursday, is Magical Night. And for the first time in the history of that event, we are closing First Street.
Good
Glad
idea.
to hear that.
Mhm.
It's a good thing and a bad thing, but it's a good thing.
No, it's a good thing.
It's
I think it's a good thing for the event itself. It's going to be a change, which will be
Mhm.
just something they'll get used to. So we're going to go through it. So if there's any
If you get
comments or
anybody that's not
suggestions.
happy with that,
Pardon?
if you get anybody that's not happy,
Yeah, there's some
Send them to
downtown
Chris.
merchants that are concerned.
Just
Yes.
Joe.
just let Chris know.
Yeah, and Chris is aware of it as well, so, and it's understandable, and we're trying to put the least amount of impact on those individuals and those businesses as we can, but at the same token, take in consideration how large this event has grown and how safe we want to make it, being proactive as opposed to reactive. So that's the approach we've taken.
Good
So-
idea.
I was an advocate of that last year after walking on the streets and seeing
Yeah.
strollers, parents with little children, and I was worried.
Yep. So the one main issue is going to be parking, as we are aware, and so we're trying to rectify that by having a shuttle going from the elementary school and back to downtown, so we're trying to rectify that. It's not going to be the best solution, but it's the best solution we could come up with.
It's a good idea. Good. Anything else, Matt?
Maybe
No,
more
that's it.
people will walk up.
Pardon me?
Maybe more will walk up this year.
Yeah, we have a lot of out-of-towners, and so trying to get the word out to them as well is going to be tough, but we're going to do our best with some signage. We're trying to do some marketing, trying to do some social media, just trying to get the word out, so everybody can help by just getting the word out.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, next item, discussion items, these are two from our last meeting as well. Demolition ordinance.
So I've given you the last rendition of this ordinance. And I have started going back through and trying to work back through my notes as far as making some changes to this. The question has been asked to staff, on whether or not we need an ordinance like this. We haven't had anything obviously come up since we started talking about it originally. The only thing that I would say back to you from staff is, obviously we want to have a demolition ordinance. We don't want people demolishing anything without a permit, but it doesn't have to be to this extent that really isn't our call. This is extensive. It's not necessarily beyond the scope. There are some communities obviously around here, Cedar Rapids, that this originated from. So the biggest question mark, or the biggest item that was in front of council the last time that we had this discussion was the delay in demolition. How long could they delay without physically taking the property, and they had to basically not delay to neglect, so they couldn't just keep delaying the demolition and let the building be let go. But as written or as suggested, any house or any building over 50 years of age would be subject to the ordinance as it's written today. So.
Would that be, and I feel like I asked this question last time, but that would be a moving, like 50 would stay consistent, but, so right now it would be 1968, next year it's 1969, right? Okay.
I've always had a problem with this.
Yeah.
I mean, if you own a property and you get the proper permits, you should be able to do whatever you want with that property. Nobody should be able to tell you what you can do with it.
I just, you know, and I live in a house that was built in the 1800s. I just feel this is just too overreaching, quite honest, in terms of all the hoops and everything that needs to be jumped through for this, and that amount of time that it's going to take for Chris and the staff in terms of really fine tuning. I'm just not sure if that's time well spent right now.
I know what fostered this was the two homes at Cornell that were taken down because of the science building, and you know, I wanted to reiterate that they did go through historic preservation, received a certificate for that building and the removal. The question in everybody's mind during that period was, how little is too little time to give them to do something with those homes, i.e. move them, and how much is too long to require them to wait before they can go ahead and tear them down. And that was, I think, you know, based upon my notes, was the struggle that we were seeing from the council seated at the time was, where is that fine number, and how much could they stop that? And again, some of the other changes were pretty more staff related, so that, you know, they talked about zoning board of adjustment, things of that nature that they had pointed out, as opposed to like appeals, it should go to the council, not the board of adjustment. So there's little things in there that I've made notes to make corrections on. It has been almost 2 years since we originally discussed this ordinance.
And I even brought up about a database. They should just name houses. And they had a list of them too. They actually have a database of houses that meet their criteria. And then they could let the homeowners know this ahead of time. So then they know that, hey, if I want to do something 3 months from now, I can get this going now and get through this. And for some reason, that was just going to be too much of a thing for them. Because, like I said, a house built in 1968, very unlikely that it meets historic anything, unless somebody very famous lived there now or something like that. As far as architectural purposes, no, I don't think so.
And obviously we're not taking any action tonight, but Chris, is there anything that you're really looking for in terms of guidance?
This has just been hanging on our docket for 2 years, and I would really like to either say move forward with it or don't move forward. So
yeah, I think you just answered your own questions, quite honestly.
And that's fine. You know, as if it becomes a priority again, that's fine. You know, it's in a folder that I'll keep. Now I can put it away and not leave it on my desk. So we just wanted to know if it remained a priority. I think, again, I'm sure the question will come back up at some point in the future.
Well, the problem with something like this is that the question doesn't come up until we're faced with something
Yeah.
that is happening imminently.
Hair's on fire.
And, right, exactly. And so if our issue with this, and I would agree with it, if our issue with this is the timeframes that are set forth, I don't think anybody really argues with the goal necessarily
No.
of it. But if our issue is with the timeframes, are there ways that we can lessen the number of hoops and make those hoops on the calendar closer together?
So it's a minimum
So
of
that-
14 days. I mean, with this
Mhm.
ordinance, it's the minimum of 14 days while they make the determination of whether or not the building or structure is historic. So that's the time frame that you're really kind of working with.
Well, but then there's another one,
Yeah.
like a 60-day
Yeah, that's
demolition
the one that
review,
gets
and, you know.
So that process is fine. I don't necessarily have any issue with the 14-day stay. That's the 50-year-old kind of moving target, as we've discussed. It does get up to 60 days if they, during that 14-day review period, find that the building is or has the potential to be historic in nature. That led to questions by, the council at the time was, what avenues do we give the city versus the homeowner? Because they were seeking basically up to a year, I believe,
Yeah.
to stay that demolition while they figured out what they could do with that historic building. I think we got it down to less than 6 months, depending on whether or not they hit these milestones. And the milestones are the part that I don't have. I can recreate, but those are the milestones that I don't have. But as I asked the mayor, I really don't want to spend any more time on this ordinance if it's not something that is a priority of the council, and the council has since shifted. But I don't know that it's necessarily the waiting periods. I don't know that the system that we have is necessarily broken. That's just me.
So absent something like this, what, are we satisfied with the system as it currently sits?
Staff is. There were members of the community that were not. So to kind of go back to Cornell's, they are actually or within a historic preservation district. So the whole campus is. They had to go to HPC, the Historic Preservation Commission. What the commission did not have was the ability to slow them down. So they either had to make a determination of whether or not there was no significant impact to the Historic Preservation District, or not. I mean, that's basically the decision. So they couldn't stay the demolition is really what it boiled down to. This would stay that demolition to a certain extent. So I guess for
Can we
you,
focus
it
this
really,
just on can we focus this just on the historical districts then? So that they have the power within the historical districts to stay the process?
yes.
That's where I would go then. Because the people who bought in a historical district know what they got into. This would allow the group
That was
to
one of the
slow.
questions
That's
that you
what I
guys
would-
discussed at the time was, is it citywide, is it not citywide? Staff had
Right.
suggested something simpler to these districts, and it was decided maybe to look at citywide because there were other older homes that might be affected. And that's where we came up with a 50-year-old
Right.
trying
No, I
to,
think that would be.
What does it take to expand those, Chris? So let's say we do what Eric just mentioned, then all of a sudden, hey, we need to expand our, 'cause like the house I live in, there's 3 houses that are built in 1800s, but we're not in that. So what does it take to expand that? And
you
do we
can
have
set a
choice?
date. You could set a date that it was constructed before. You could say, you could be specific into those districts. However, in the instance of your home, for instance, it makes me as a staff person a little nervous on the time frame that we require you to wait to do any demolition. Because the city does run a risk at some point of being considered a takings. So we've taken, the foreseeable use of your property away from you, and we did not provide you any payment for that value. the question that's kind of in front of us, how long do we make you wait to go through these hurdles to see if you can find another alternative to what you're going to do with the home? You know, so we can write this.
Yeah, I mean, would we be opposed to doing like historic districts, moving it from 50 years to 100? Because a 1968 home, I don't think we need to worry about. And maybe even shortening like the 60 to 30 days or something. I mean, are we going to find something in 60 days that we wouldn't have been able to figure out in 30?
Just gives it more time.
In the
I mean,
case of
certainly it gives
Cornell,
them more time, but
in the case of Cornell, there was an argument that there were a couple members of the public that were willing to move the homes, but they needed, I think, 6 months potentially to get them moved. And therein lies the question: as what can we require them to do legally? And I can't answer that for you tonight to tell you that we would we end up in court potentially if we made that date too long?
well, I guess I know we're not gonna say, okay, here it is tonight and let's pass something, but I would like to see something put on the books, only because I remember I was a member of council when that was going on, and it just was not a fun time. So I would rather clean this up, shorten it up, fewer hoops, maybe just the historic district, something nice and confined, people know what they're getting into, and put something on the books so that we can then not, because Cornell's going to expand. I mean, that's just, they're going to do something else, and we're going to flip out at some point and try and move a house in 3 days, and it's, I don't want to try and do that again. So, I guess I would prefer to tighten this up and get something on the books so that we're not sticking it in the lap of some other council down the road.
That makes sense for everybody? Chris, I think you could probably just,
Yeah, we can't, like I said,
but I just wouldn't go to what we have in front of
I
us
did
now.
not want to try to recreate an ordinance
No.
if it wasn't still a
I think,
priority.
based off what Scott said, I think there's some
So
areas.
just focusing on historic district.
Yeah,
And then, like I said, that if they're worried about other homes elsewhere, why don't they just send out letters to these homeowners stating that, hey,
yeah.
in the future, we deem your house as some prize to the city, and
if you plan on doing
notify us in
anything, work with
advance.
us, and we'd love to help you.
That's exactly,
Just
work with us.
If you're just thinking about it, 6 months, give us a little time, and we can work things out.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
The way I see it, it's going to be pretty much a case-by-case scenario anyway.
Yeah.
That's what's challenging about it.
All right, good conversation. Anything else from anybody? Chris, you feel you got what you need?
Yeah.
Okay. Next item, possible budget CIP. Chris?
So, at the previous meeting, I gave you a 2-page spreadsheet. It had 52 projects on it. That was the initial list of requests. We now have a 1-page sheet that has 21, for the most part, funded projects. And I preface that by saying there's caveats to this. So, at the bottom, again, you'll see the projects that were either completed or in the process of being completed in fiscal year 19. That's the fiscal year that we are in today. Projects that will carry over between fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20 are just to the right of that, am I right? That's almost $10 million, of course. The community center is 8.6 of that. The UV disinfection was being required by the state, it's another 1.6. So, excuse that number just a little bit, but those are 2 rather large projects that are going to be moving forward. The 5th Avenue traffic signals is moving forward. The alley improvements coming out of that lost funding will move forward sometime this spring. Nature Trail Park is they're still trying to decide on A, B, and C recommendations to the council. And then Elliott Park purchase, that is the scope and development. We're going to purchase that 5.5 acres by the railroad track. So we haven't agreed upon price, and we'll just make that purchase at some point in one of the 2 fiscal years. So those are the projects that are kind of hanging out there right now that are moving forward. Right now, I have the wagon pass at $100,000. The reason that it sits at $100,000 right now is because we're not sure which alternative we're going to at this point. So I do know in the past they talked about replacing the entire culvert structure and leaving a drive underneath. They've also talked about filling it in. So at this point, I've left it at $100,000, and we'll have further discussions with the homeowner of ours as far as that project moving forward. The First Street Bridge, that's $155,000, obviously, because we have to work with the railroad to have extra inspectors and a whole other. I think they add about $55,000 to the project because we're dealing with the EP. So, 8th Avenue Northwest, that's the quiet zone, that's scheduled at $75,000. As of right now, I think I got that project under franchise fees. Talking about borrowing that from franchise fees and repaying that with TIF. Gotta have a debt before we can actually get the TIF dollars for it. So it's kind of my plan with that project is using available funding that we have right now. We'll pay ourselves back over the course of the next 2 years. And then Highway 30, Highway 1 roundabout upgrades. We have about between $25,000 and $22,000 there. CDG also has some funds potentially available. This would mainly be for the landscaping and signage, building up that center island. Of course, they recommended not to put any artwork there, so now we're talking about potentially redesigning that center and having it more a natural look, but making sure that people can't visibly see across that project. Can't do anything with the painting of the one-way, two-way until the bypass is complete. So continue to work forward on that one. Other projects that would potentially be franchise fee would be grading the soccer fields at LA Park. That's the 5.5 acres that we're purchasing from Skogman. That's a definite need simply because we're utilizing in the interior track by the elementary school right now. And we're, again, not good or bad, but we're at the mercy of each other, the school and the city, and sometimes the schedules just don't work quite right. So then Davis Park is in desperate need of some upgrades. That restroom facility is extremely distressed. And the lighting, we do have Alliance on the hook. They're going to actually reset poles for us and do some of that work. They're just not going to pay to install the lights. So these will not be LED lights. If they were LED lights, it would be closer to like 60,000, I think. Yeah, it was crazy. Yeah. So, and then the trail would come from the trail funding. So I have funding mechanisms for all of those items that are listed. The water meters, because it's highlighted in yellow, that is a project that is going to take a special look in that we would have to work with some of the water meter vendors potentially to see if they have any way to back those projects and have us make annual payments to them. Otherwise, that project is going to hang there at a $500,000 price tag. So that's for radio read upgrades, basically going digital would be a project that I would love to get done and not have to physically go and read meters every day, but it's also got a decent price tag on it. Nothing in sanitary sewer until we figure out what's going on there. So all those projects have been removed. Storm inlets, I've left $25,000 in there. It does not have a funding mechanism because we've been doing it out of road use tax. The guys in Public Works have been accomplishing those projects and doing an extremely good job, but they're very much based on what funding we have available. So they might do 2 or 3 in a year, they might do 1. We'll just kind of have to play that one by ear. The streetscape still has to go through the downtown design committee, but past the alley improvements off of Main Street at 150, they do have funding available to work with new benches and wayfinding signage in the Main Street area. And then from the equipment standpoint, still want to get a broom for the Kubota so that we can use that on the trails. Some of these lighter snow to actually brush off better than scraping or using a blade. F-150 replacement. We have some diesels that we're trying to obviously get replaced because they're, Nick stated at the last meeting, we're having issues with overheating and things like that. There's not conducive to what we're using them for. Trailer, new trailer, the back jetter, that's what we've been borrowing from Lisbon as of late. We pothole with it, so basically we use it instead of digging. We can jet down and uncover gas line and water main without hitting them. So we can also use it, obviously, to clear some of our sewer system. And I preface that by saying this isn't a unit that's going to go in and jet every sewer line that we have in town. We're still going to have to use Roto-Rooter for a vast majority of them. It's not going to, it might have a cutting tool, but it's not necessarily going to go through a large root ball and anything like that. So I don't want to sell this as something that's not going to happen, but it will get a ton of use and will be split between water, sewer, and road use tax. The camera and the boring holes can actually be within sewer operating funds. So with some of the projects that we took off or will take off the budget this year, those can come in and it'll be a net zero effect. The police server is a kind of an absolute, so we have $35,000 in this CIP to make some server upgrades, and we have $35,000 more to go. That one's obviously tricky because it's a general fund expense, but it's something that we're going to have to find room for. The ash borer has come out of historically road use tax. We continue to treat those, and again, I'm always telling people this is not a treatment to save these trees long term, because you have to do this treatment every other year. We are simply trying to make way so that we can replant these trees as we're removing them and not do them all at once. So this is kind of a budget saver for the city. It's cheaper, obviously, to try and maintain as many as we can right now. And ones that we've been taking out have not taken the injections. Hold fast to this one. We did have a staff member that was doing the injections. Staff member is no longer with us, so Nick and I have not figured out all the details of this yet, but right now it's in there. And then the last big one, obviously, is a new engine. It is time to replace one of the new fire engines. You'll see in my note that they're not quite there, so I'll sit down with Dave, try and figure out the best way to get this purchased. It is typically at least a 6-month lead time, almost a year to get one of these built as soon as you get them ordered. So might try to do this over a couple fiscal years, might try to do a half with cash that we have, and then maybe a short-term note with one of the local banks for a 5-year period. So they're trying to be somewhat creative so that we don't deplete all of their capital funds with one purchase. So we're in the process of working with the rural fire district for them to be just basically a contract with the city moving forward.
Just clarifying, this is not a ladder truck, right?
Not a ladder truck. If it were a ladder truck, you would have to double right now.
That's what I
Double
thought.
it at 30.
Yeah. Although with the big structures they're building, 17 minutes to Marion. That's how long it would take to get here, 17 minutes.
45
What?
is the estimation on it, is 45
They told
minutes.
us 17 minutes.
Well,
3
that's the
years
drive
ago.
time, but by the time you put the page out, get them, it's about
Okay,
45
that's even worse.
So
So smoke detectors, people.
So that's kind of the list. I would only ask that you take this list and compare it to the one that I gave you before. If there were items that were removed that you question or want to see back, please let me know. From a franchise fee perspective, it was fairly easy this year simply because the wagon pass has been on there for a number of years and I finally have a funding mechanism for it. And then, of course, some of these park projects definitely need attention. Moving forward, you know, as I pointed out at the bottom, what we're receiving is higher than what Alliant estimated for us, so I do not want to make long-term decisions for this franchise fee without knowing for sure what a 5% is actually going to look like. But the fight over those funds will be harder moving forward because they will be the primary street funding source as well as the primary parks funding source. I do have boxing gloves.
For our entertainment pleasure.
Chris, is there a reason you have a duplicate entry on the project's completed list for SCBA fill station replacement, 50,000? It's listed twice.
Oh, actually, one's not a fill station, one is the actual gear itself. So it should be SCBA equipment, and the other one is the fill station.
And they're both 50.
Actually, the gear itself is more than 50.
I was hoping for the other direction. More than 50.
I won't make that change. When I'm doing this Excel spreadsheet, if I've typed it before, it just kind of automatically fills, and if I'm not watching it, then I gotta.
So you'll just make the correction and
Here.
send it out to the council? Okay. Anybody have any questions for Chris? This is just a good thing to read through and questions, reach out.
Let's get a comparison. Remember when we had that plan meeting last year when we prioritized everything? I just need to revisit that against this list.
The goal setting?
Yeah, our goal setting.
Okay, yeah. Would you like a copy of that plan back?
Probably wouldn't hurt.
Okay, yeah. I would say that for the most part, with the UV disinfection in the community center, we hit most of your goals, but
Yeah.
then you have a ton that are like, that received 3,
Right.
and then they're all over the place, but, yeah, I will resend that report out.
Anything else? Move on to the reports, not really report per se, but I obviously want to thank Deb for joining us up here. I was gonna do it at the beginning of the meeting, but I wanted to get started so she could leave and have several thoughts.
You already voted, you're in.
Yeah,
So it is.
It's official, so, thank you. Anything from council or committee reports?
One thing I'd like to bring up, I walk my dog a lot in the mornings, right, and and I've noticed this over the years, after the snows, about 30, 40% of the sidewalks on uptown don't get cleaned. And I was just wondering why it isn't possible to get them all together, and let's say there's 1,500 foot of storefront there, and get a contractor to come in, give a quote, and then divide the price by the length of your storefront, so that all those get cleaned, so there isn't any possibility of people falling and all that. I mean, it's just ridiculous. This one's clean, this one's not. This one's clean, this one's not. They should be all clean by the time the businesses start opening up, because it's just a bad deal. And I don't know why that one. I mean, if he says $300 and there's how many storefronts? I mean, that isn't that much. $20, $30 per snowfall, and they only have to move it into the street, and the city will pick up the snow. I mean, it's not that big a deal. But it's just a safety point right there.
I want to do that all around town, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Anything else? City administrator's report?
Nothing other than City Hall will be closed Thursday and Friday this week.
Don't forget, Saturday is Small Business Saturday, so we have a lot of small businesses, retail businesses that we can support, and a lot of them are doing special activities, so keep that in mind.
Be safe out on the roads with holiday week upon us.
The only one thing I do want to point out is that a letter will be going out to residents along Palisades Road. It was determined that the best way to handle the construction process would be to close off portions of Palisades to parking and the schools, you know, really the only one affected by that will be the school. But residents along Palisades, where this is going to be in effect, can reach out to the police department if they are going to have a family event, you know, especially over the weekend. But I assure everybody involved that you do not want to park along Palisades during this construction process, especially when they start bringing in these large trucks with the sandwich board panels. That will be both part of our project and the auditorium. They're long, they're wide, they don't move. So we will make that no parking. We did have the school is going to utilize the old tennis courts for contractor parking. So we're doing as much as we can
Trees are down.
to help out.
They've gotten in
Best
15
use of
years.
it.
Yeah, it's been most
Tom's got some parking across the street.
It works
Like
now.
Iowa
Sitting in the
football.
I was gonna say, he'll be out there with a
$10
vest on.
$200
So, just a heads up.
How far from 10 Palisades, how far east? I mean,
To about the midway through,
track?
no, midway through the
Block.
tennis courts.
Oh.
Tennis court, okay.
Well, that's not
That's
that far
not
down
bad. It
there.
really isn't.
No, we've left a portion of Pally. Here's the only thing, it could go all of Palisades for a short period of time, depending on, so the panels are all, for us, are going to come out of Dyersville, the concrete panels. So they're gonna utilize Highway 1. We still don't know on the roundabouts, especially the one on 10, how they would maneuver that. If they could make that, we would send them through the roundabouts, but there's still some question really as it relates on when those are going to be delivered. So initially, midway through the tennis courts.
You better tell the state to have some extra signs.
Don't all get mowed over.
During the pre-construction meeting, we did speak. The contractors are aware that they need to, when those are going to be delivered, they will contact our PD, and we'll be able to do some traffic control. But yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Anything else? Well, I do not see Robert here, Chris, so we will just adjourn.
No, I would not ask you to go in without legal
No.
counsel.
So no further business, meeting stands adjourned.